Imagine a moment so powerful that time itself grinds to a halt, that you could freeze the chaos of the world, pause the ticking clock, and catch your breath in the stillness. Sounds like a superpower, right? But what if you didn't need a cape or a fancy gadget? What if the real question was, what if you could actually press pause on life? Would you use it to dodge awkward conversations, savor fleeting moments, or maybe escape your own mistakes? The idea sparks a whirlwind of possibilities and maybe a little bit of fear. Because when you think about it, time is the one thing no one ever gets back. So why not spend a little time pondering what you'd do if the clock suddenly stopped? The concept of temporal suspension, time, as we perceive it, is a relentless river flowing forward, carrying everyone along with it. Yet, the idea of pausing that flow, of halting the relentless march, resonates deeply with the human psyche. The concept of temporal suspension dares to challenge the very fabric of reality. It's not merely about standing still or freezing moments. It suggests a profound manipulation of a universe's most fundamental dimension. Theoretically, if one could tap into a state where time ceases to advance, the implications stretch into the realms of physics, philosophy, and personal experience. Is it possible? In the realm of science fiction, yes, technologies like hypothetical time-stop devices or concepts like Einstein's relativity hint at conditions under which time might behave differently. But practically, that remains an open question, locked away in the domain of imagination and future discoveries. Holding on to such a moment of suspended time would create an intense sense of power and unease. Humans are wired to move, to act, to change. To be caught in a world frozen in stillness would evoke a cocktail of emotions: elation, frustration, fear, wonder. One could imagine a scenario where someone presses a button and suddenly finds the world paused around them, like being the lone survivor in a movie where everyone else fades into stillness. There's a certain humor in the idea. Finally, you get across that busy street without the dreaded, "Are you sure you want to leave the page?" interruptions, or stare at a blinking cursor in peace while everything else remains just there. But beneath that levity lies a deeper question. What does it mean to be frozen in a moment, knowing everything else is still out of sync? It's an uncharted territory where the mind races to grasp a reality that is simultaneously unchanging and fleeting. This hypothetical pause also invites reflection on human desires and vulnerabilities. If time could be paused, it might seem like the ultimate cheat. Endless seconds to reflect, correct mistakes, savor brief joys, or evade disasters. Yet, how would that impact emotional states? Would we cherish the silent stillness or grow restless with the overwhelming emptiness of a world on pause? The unpredictability of feelings is central here. Moments of grief could linger painfully in suspended time, twisting in a liminal space where closure might never emerge. Conversely, moments of pure happiness could feel magnified, like a snapshot frozen forever, making us wonder if stopping time could also trap us in a never-ending snapshot of that exact feeling. The idea also harvests curiosity about how our consciousness would adapt. Would we become addicted to that suspended state, craving escapism from linear flow? Or would the realization of such power lead to existential chaos? In some ways, pausing time might be an even more profound form of control, a way to stretch out moments, to dodge the relentless tides of mortality and change. Yet this power could also magnify our deepest fears, the fear of stagnation, of being stuck in a loop, or worse, losing touch with the inevitable flow of life. It's a tantalizing thought, this concept of hanging in a suspended bubble where everything outside stands still and we get to flirt with eternity, just for a moment. The first encounter, discovering the power. There's a strange thrill in realizing that, technically, time could be paused, just for a moment, or maybe longer. Such a discovery would turn everyday life into something approaching magic. Imagine the first time you stumble upon this ability, perhaps accidentally, during a moment of extreme frustration or awe. Maybe it's a quiet afternoon, and suddenly the world around you stalls. The leaves stop swirling in the breeze, the clock on the wall freezes, and you're left standing there, caught in a surreal bubble where nothing moves except your own breath, which continues to rise and fall. This moment of discovery might be shockingly mundane or wildly exhilarating. Perhaps you're in a busy coffee shop, irritated that you're running late. You might realize that everyone is frozen in time, yet their expressions remain, and oddly enough, their blinking or fidgeting hints that they're watching you, still aware beneath the surface of stillness. That stark, almost cinematic clarity can be both terrifying and intoxicating. The power to control time's flow could mean suddenly stealing a glance at someone's face without them noticing, or pausing a confrontation just before it escalates into chaos. The initial shock of uncovering such control is often accompanied by a flood of questions. How long can first hold this? Is it just a trick of perception, or do first truly hold dominion over the flow of moments? Humor becomes inevitable in this newfound reality. You might find yourself pausing during a boring meeting, watching your coworkers mid-sentence freeze like mannequins while you breathe quietly, feeling like the star of your own detective story. Or, on a more mischievous note, you could freeze a friend mid-yawn right when they're about to say something embarrassing, just to see their face frozen in utter surprise when time resumes. It's in these tiny acts that the power begins to feel less like something cinematic and more like an intimate secret, something that makes you realize how precious and fragile the fabric of time really is. Most people, upon discovering this ability, might grapple with a rush of guilt or a rush of humor, depending on their mood. But deep down, beneath the humor and awe, there lurks a profound awareness. With great power over time comes an even greater responsibility, if you're inclined to think that way. At its core, this realization opens the door to questions about purpose, morality, and desire. Do you use this power to gain advantage, or do you protect it as a secret, an unspoken gift only you know about? The first encounter with this ability often feels like stumbling into a hidden room in the house of reality, one filled with endless possibilities, but also the weight of the unknown. It's a delicate dance. One moment of discovery can shift your understanding of what it means to truly live within time's relentless march. Understanding the mechanics. How would it work? The concept of pausing time, though firmly in the realm of science fiction for now, invites fascinating speculation about how such a feat could theoretically operate within the laws of physics. In our universe, time is intertwined with space, forming the fabric of space-time as described by Einstein's theory of relativity. If one were to imagine a way to halt this flow, essentially stopping all processes, it's necessary to consider what mechanisms might be involved. One possibility involves manipulating the fundamental constants or leveraging exotic states of matter that can sustain conditions where time's arrow appears to freeze. For instance, scientists explore extreme environments like black hole event horizons or quantum states that, in some sense, slow down or obscure the passage of time. These, however, are on the fringes of current understanding and involve phenomena that are incredibly difficult to harness or even fully comprehend. Delving deeper, one hypothetical approach might involve advanced control of gravitational fields. Because gravity influences the flow of time, clocks run slightly slower in stronger gravitational fields. Perhaps an extraordinarily powerful gravitational manipulator could be used to stretch or flatten time locally. In theory, if you could generate a gravity well intense enough and precisely controlled, you might slow the flow of time to a standstill in a confined area. Caution, however, is always warranted. Creating such a field would require energy levels far beyond anything presently achievable, comparable perhaps to the energy emitted by entire stars or more. This idea also prompts questions about what happens to consciousness inside such a bubble. Would a person even perceive the pause, or would their mind be trapped in a static moment, unable to process change? Another theoretical possibility sits within the realm of quantum mechanics. Quantum states are notorious for their strange behaviors. Superpositions, entanglements, and indeterminate states. Scientists have pondered whether manipulating quantum entanglement or decoherence might allow for a form of quantum pause. This would involve freezing quantum systems in a superposed state that isn't collapsing into a definite outcome, effectively stalling the progression of time at the microscopic level. Extending this to macro levels is a mind-bending challenge, but if achieved, it might resemble pausing, except that the entire universe would need to be locked into this delicate quantum state, raising profound questions about causality and observation. In essence, the mechanics behind pausing time remain speculative, hinging on advances in understanding gravity, quantum physics, and energy manipulation. To entertain the notion seriously is to grapple with the limits of what science knows and what might someday be possible. Though for now, it's a dance of ideas rooted in theory rather than application. The allure, however, is undeniable. The thought that if only we could stall the ceaseless march of moments, perhaps we could hold onto a perfect snapshot of life, catching our breath as the universe waits for us to catch up. Immediate possibilities, limitless leisure or chaos. If you could pause time, the boundaries of what's possible would seemingly stretch into infinity, at least from your perspective. Think about it. Suddenly, the relentless march of seconds, minutes, and hours halts. The world becomes a still image or a slow-motion playback, granting you a moment to breathe, reflect, or manipulate your surroundings without any ticking clock pressing down on you. The immediate allure is tempting. You could indulge in endless leisure, catching up on sleep, savoring a favorite meal, or finally indulging in hobbies that typically get shoved aside by the rush of daily life. It's the ultimate power to extend your personal universe, removing the constraints of time. But lurking behind this seemingly idyllic scenario are more tangled thoughts, chaos, temptation, and the unpredictable consequences of wielding such a potent gift. On one side, limitless leisure becomes almost a certainty. Imagine lying on a beach as the world is frozen, sipping an indeterminate drink, or binge-watching episodes without the fear of losing track of time. You could read entire books in one sitting, stories that take hours or days to finish, compressed into a single paused moment. Productivity could skyrocket if used rightly, solving complex problems, practicing skills, or catching up on unfinished projects with zero pressure. From a pure pleasure standpoint, time pausing could extend life itself, providing room for introspection and wearisome but deeply satisfying moments that often elude us amid the chaos of modern existence. Still, this endless leisure has a flip side. If everyone else remains frozen or unaware of your actions, it's tempting to take advantage of the isolated power. Nothing to stop a robber, a cheat, or even yourself from crossing ethical boundaries. The temptation to manipulate circumstances, taking things that aren't yours, or spying on others, becomes a possibility that can spiral into chaos. Chaos emerges as an unavoidable shadow cast by this power. If you pause time and step into a bank just to see what the inside looks like or move objects around without repercussions, you quickly realize it's not just a playground. Small actions, like altering the environment or escaping a tight spot, can ripple outward, creating unpredictable consequences once time resumes. What if, during that paused moment, someone else, if they somehow recognize your influence, did something spontaneous that changes everything? There could be accidents, misunderstandings, or worse, a breakdown of social order if this ability falls into the wrong hands. The ethical dilemma becomes complex. Is it justified to use this power for personal gain, or does it inevitably lead to a loss of accountability? With unlimited control over a single moment, human nature might push toward impulsivity, and what seemed like a harmless pause could snowball into chaos at the flip of a second. The emotional implications are equally fascinating. Humans derive meaning from the passage of time, growth, change, and even suffering. Pausing time could distort these fundamental experiences, making moments lose their significance or, conversely, intensify them exponentially. The fear of losing our connection to the natural flow of life might make some tremble at the thought of such an ability. Others might feel exhilarated, an escape hatch from fears like aging or regret. The dilemma lies in whether this control ultimately enhances the human experience or corrupts it. In a universe where time can freeze, chaos is not just a possibility, but an ever-present shadow, awaiting to tip the delicate balance of order and disorder. The ethical quandaries, right and wrong in time pausing. Pausing time, if it were even possible, would present a battleground for moral instincts as raw and unpredictable as a perfect storm. Imagine holding the power to freeze moments, no more rushing through traffic, missing the chance to say something meaningful, or losing precious seconds in life's chaos. But with such potential, questions of ethics emerge like weeds in a garden. Is it right to halt the universe's relentless march just because you want to savor a perfect cup of coffee or avoid a difficult conversation? And what about the unintentional consequences? Because in truth, tampering with time would ripple outwards, affecting not just your personal moments, but the intricate web of cause and effect that sustains reality. The most immediate dilemma might be fairness. If some could pause time to gain advantage, say, to study longer, cheat in exams, or outmaneuver competitors, where does that leave the rest of us? In a world where time can be manipulated, ethical boundaries blur. Is it morally permissible to pause and enjoy a luxurious moment while others remain in motion, suffering from hunger, disease, or war? Some might argue that exploiting such a power for personal gain is inherently selfish, a kind of hubris that undermines the social contract. Others might find themselves rationalizing that if no one else has such power, then it's simply an untapped talent, similar to having a photographic memory or super strength. Still, the concern lingers. How does one draw the line between an innocent pause and an unjust, game-changing interference? Then there's the question of consent and autonomy. For example, if someone else is unaware that you've paused time, or if interactions occur while you're atemporal, you could inadvertently manipulate their choices, thoughts, or feelings. Imagine mindlessly shifting a loved one's day to avoid an argument. Such a notion touches on moral territory akin to emotional manipulation. Do we have the right to alter another person's experience without their awareness? This touches on deep ethical debates about free will and autonomy. The very act of pausing time could turn into a stealthy form of control, raising uncomfortable questions about boundaries. If every indecision, every mistake, or every moment of pain can be surgically intervened upon, what remains of personal responsibility or authentic human experience? Humor, of course, enters the fray as a lighthearted counterpoint. What if someone used time pausing to hide a whoopee cushion or play pranks on others? Yet, beneath that humor lies a serious reflection on the boundaries of morality. The line between playful mischief and morally questionable behavior begins to blur. Is it wrong to use such power for selfish pranks? Or does the context absolve the risk? Moreover, if you could rewind or pause moments of vulnerability, fear, or despair, is there a duty to intervene ethically? Or do we, in essence, become moral arbitrators of the universe, deciding when and how to break the unyielding flow of time for what we deem good? The ethical quandaries deepen because, unlike most moral dilemmas, time pausing isn't just about right and wrong. It's about recognizing the profound responsibility that such power would impose on human conscience. Impact on personal lives, relationships, and self-perception. If you could stop time entirely, the effect on personal lives would be nothing short of revolutionary, especially when it comes to relationships and how we view ourselves. Imagine the possibilities, being able to pause awkward conversations or tense moments, giving yourself a breather before confronting difficult truths, or even sneaking away from commitments that no longer serve you. For relationships, the ability to stop time could mean endless moments to reflect quietly, or perhaps manipulate situations to your advantage. But it also raises profound questions about authenticity. Would the connection remain genuine when so much of its fabric depends on the unspoken, on spontaneous reactions rather than calculated pauses? On the personal recognition front, self-perception would undoubtedly take on a new dimension. When you pause time, you're granted a rare space for introspection, an almost surreal chance to examine yourself without the constant chatter of external stimuli. It might bring clarity or, conversely, overwhelm. For example, someone who's always been self-critical could use this pause to analyze their flaws under a microscope, or perhaps realize that their flaws are less significant than they believed. Conversely, it might also foster an inflated ego, seeing oneself in an idealized moment and then craving to replicate that perfection in real life. It's amusing, really, how the thought of stopping entire moments seems like it would solve so many dilemmas, yet would likely amplify the inner chaos of human perception as people struggle with the widened gap between their ideal selves and their real-time selves. Relationships could become a double-edged sword. On one side, you'd be able to cherish loved ones without interruption, hold on to their smiles, savor their laughter, or even replay important conversations for better understanding. On the flip side, exploiting time stops for personal gain, perhaps manipulating a partner's decisions or delaying confrontations, could distort the integrity of genuine connection. It's tempting, isn't it, to pause the world when things get uncomfortable, when emotions run high, or when vulnerability feels like a gamble. Yet, consider how this might breed mistrust or a sense of disconnection. If your partner knew that you could freeze moments, would they ever truly believe in the spontaneity of your affection? Or would you become intoxicated by the power to control reality moment by moment, stripping relationships of their messy, imperfect charm? The human mind, after all, craves certainty, yet thrives on unpredictability. Stopping time might provide a false sense of control, but it would also challenge our very human need for authenticity, both in love and in self-understanding. We construct our identities based on the continuous stream of experiences, mistakes, regrets, and joys. Hijacking that flow might temporarily bring relief, but long-term, it could distort how we perceive growth and change. After all, moments of discomfort or chaos often serve as crucial catalysts for transformation. Pausing would be like hitting the pause button during a crucial life scene. Sounds helpful until you realize that life is driven by the unsteady rhythm of motion, not stillness. Social and economic disruptions. If the ability to pause time suddenly became a reality, the social fabric of society might wobble on its axis much more than people realize. Think about the countless interactions that rely on the flow of time, dating, negotiations, even small talk with neighbors. Pausing time would throw human relationships into a chaos of uncertainty. For instance, how would trust hold up when someone could seemingly vanish from the world mid-conversation or slip away with your belongings while everything is frozen? It's akin to a universe where betrayal isn't just a possibility, but a constant looming threat, making social cohesion fragile and unpredictable. On a broader scale, the ideological underpinnings of work, productivity, and societal norms would be shattered. The economy isn't just about money. It's about the rhythm of exchange, supply chains, and consumer behaviors that are all heavily dependent on the steady passage of time. If people could halt time at will, suddenly a major stock market crash might become a much riskier affair. Investors might weigh the possibility of pausing and stealing before the market opens, or locking down assets indefinitely. The very idea of work would become murky. Why bother showing up if you can pause and skip the mundane parts of your routine? Entire industries might collapse or be transformed into gray markets centered on time manipulation devices. The socioeconomic chaos could deepen as disparities sharpen. Those with access to the ability to pause time could hoard resources, food, technology, opportunities, creating a new layer of inequality. Imagine wealthy elites who can freeze moments in time to stockpile goods or eliminate their competition. Meanwhile, the less privileged might be left in a perpetual scramble, unable to catch up or defend against those who wield this power cunningly. Societies could fracture into factions of timers versus non-timers, with violence and distrust spreading like wildfire. The social order, already fragile in many places, could disintegrate under the weight of unchecked time manipulation, magnifying existing inequalities and creating new ones with terrifying speed. Legal systems would face impossible challenges. Laws based on the passage of time, like contracts that expire, deadlines, or statutes of limitations, will become meaningless or incredibly complicated. A person could freeze moments just long enough to fake their disappearance from the legal record or manipulate evidence, rendering courts powerless. Crime would take on a new dimension. Theft, fraud, even assassination could all occur with a chilling combination of timing and silence. The fabric of societal rules built on the assumption of a shared, linear timeline might unravel entirely, leaving behind a society perpetually in a state of paranoia and chaos, where trust and certainty become luxuries only the very privileged could afford. In essence, the social and economic disruptions wrought by the ability to pause time wouldn't be subtle. They would challenge every layer of human organization, revealing just how fragile the order we take for granted truly is. A world where time could be frozen at what might feel like the ultimate test of human morality and resilience, or a one-way ticket to a social dystopia, where the normal rules no longer apply. The butterfly effect, unintended consequences. The notion of pausing time sparks a wild cascade of questions, most notably about chaos and unpredictability. Even if stopping moments were possible, the ripple effects, like minor ripples transforming into tidal waves, are unavoidable. Small actions typically initiate chains of events that rapidly escalate beyond our foresight. For example, gently nudging a cup on a cluttered table can, in a blink, cause it to topple and spill, but in a more profound sense, disrupting the lives of those who depended on that cup for their morning brew. That's the essence of the butterfly effect. Tiny influences snowballing into outcomes so vast they become unrecognizable from the original flickering cause. Humans love the idea of wielding control over time. It's seductive to think we could fix mistakes or savor perfect moments indefinitely. But if you pause to think about the unintended consequences, it complicates that vision. For instance, reversing a small decision, like choosing a different route to work, might seem harmless, but could lead to a series of surprises. Meeting someone new, missing an accident, or inadvertently changing someone's life in ways you'd never anticipate. It's like planting a single seed, only to watch an entire forest grow, one you didn't plan or could predict. As a result, even the most calculated choice might spiral into a maze of unforeseen impacts, occasionally ending in chaos or revelation. The real challenge with the butterfly effect comes from understanding that human systems, social, ecological, or technological, are inherently sensitive to initial conditions. Think about a seemingly trivial text message that, over time, influences friendships, careers, or even political movements. In history, seemingly insignificant decisions, like a missed handshake or an offhand comment, have ignited wars or toppled regimes. It's a humbling reality that when you interfere with the flow of time, you are not just changing that moment. You're reshaping entire worlds. The trick is that we often have no way of knowing what those ripples will be until they crash onto a distant shore, and by then, it's too late to undo the tides. In essence, the butterfly effect is a reminder that with great power comes great unpredictability. The more you try to manipulate or pause moments, the more you risk unleashing chaos or, conversely, missing out on serendipity. If you could hold time still, you might be terrified to act at all, from fear of triggering some disaster to yearning for a perfect, unchanging moment. Instead, perhaps the beauty of life lies in its unpredictability, those unintended, sometimes chaotic, but always authentic outcomes. Trying to control or freeze that flow might diminish the very essence of what makes human existence so fascinating and fragile. Philosophical questions, free will, and predetermination. If time suddenly paused at a whim, the implications on free will and predetermination become not just philosophical puzzles, but personal moral riddles. When you think about freezing the moment, say, holding a glass of water midair or catching your dog mid-zoom, you're touching on an ancient debate about whether our actions are genuinely ours or just the inevitable progression of prior causes. Is every decision you make truly yours? Or is it just the result of a complicated chain of events that could have been set in motion long before you even considered grabbing that glass? The very act of pausing time brings to the forefront questions about agency. Are we puppets dancing to a pre-scripted show, or do we hold the strings? It's tempting to think that if you could halt time, you would suddenly gain total control over your environment. Yet within that suspended moment, the boundaries of free will get even trickier. Would sticking your hand into a paused fire be a test of courage? Or would it reveal whether free will truly exists, or if your decision to do so is already embedded into the fabric of reality? If your choices are predetermined, then even the impulse to act differently is just an illusion. But if you genuinely have free will, then coldly freezing time exposes a powerful paradox. Holding the power to change the world but being unable to act because you're stuck in that static moment. This suggests that free will might not be an all-or-nothing phenomenon, but something that exists in tension with the notion of predetermination. Thinking about predetermination, especially in a pause-time scenario, also leads to questions about the universe as a perfectly choreographed stage or chaotic playground. If everything is predestined, then every flicker of decision, every moment we experience as choice is just part of a grand, unchangeable script that can be simultaneously comforting and unnerving. Comforting because it suggests that chaos and randomness are illusions. Everything unfolds exactly as it's meant to. Unnerving because it strips away the romantic idea of moral responsibility, implying that choices are mere illusions, and blame or praise become meaningless. Would the moral stakes diminish if we knew that all our decisions were pre-written? Or do we cling more fiercely to the belief in free will precisely because it's the only thing that gives our lives meaning? In applying this to real life, imagine navigating a moment when time is frozen, deciding whether to forgive someone or to act justly. If free will is just an illusion, then these moral choices are already decided, and our feeling of autonomy is a comforting placebo. But if free will exists, then pausing time becomes a philosophical playground, a challenge and a temptation, to test whether we're capable of true agency. It's almost humorous how the mere concept of stopping time stretches the mind into a maze of endless what-ifs, a reminder that our understanding of ourselves as rational, autonomous beings is perhaps as fragile and fleeting as the seconds we wish we could freeze. Memory and consciousness. What remains when time stops? When you consider the idea of pausing time, the first thought that pierces through is how fragile and yet profound our perception of reality truly is. Time is the relentless backdrop for all our experiences, shaping memories and consciousness alike. If time suddenly halted, what exactly remains of that consciousness we tousle around with every waking moment? Our memories, finely woven into the fabric of our mind, might stand like fragile artifacts, momentarily preserved in the stillness. They are created and stored through neural activity, complex patterns firing across countless synapses, an intricate dance that continues while the world remains frozen outside. In that suspended reality, memories would seem almost tangible, as if they exist in a liminal space outside time's grasp. When events are frozen in place, would those memories become static, immortalized like photographs? Or might they dissolve into fragments, slipping between the cracks of a halted universe, leaving us with flickering impressions rather than solid recollections? The human mind is an unpredictable beast, often reconstructing past experiences based on incomplete or emotional cues. Without the ticking clock of passing moments, the way our brain processes these memories might shift. Perhaps they linger longer, or perhaps fade into a mist as the brain's continuous activity wanes without new input. Consciousness is even more enigmatic. Perhaps, in that moment when time halts, our awareness adapts to the silence, an odd stillness where inner thought becomes hyper-focused or eerily distant. Without change or progression, the flow of consciousness could slow to a crawl. Some might argue that consciousness requires movement, movement through moments, shifts in perception, and the passage of time itself. Yet others believe that awareness is persistent, an undercurrent that survives even the stillest of moments. Will we still be us during this pause, or would the suspension of time leave a vacuum in our sense of existence? The mind might become hyper-aware of itself, drawing inward, or perhaps it would drift aimlessly, like a boat adrift in a sea of silence. The humorous side of this scenario is imagining someone trying to remember where they left their keys in a paused universe, only to realize that the act of worrying about it becomes the only thing happening. In a way, pause time could be a test of patience, memory, and the very nature of self-awareness. Because ultimately, the only constant in life is change, and when that change is halted, the remnants of our consciousness, our sense of self, are put to the test. Do they cling to the last flickers of motion and event, or do they evaporate into the quiet static, leaving behind just a hollow echo of what once was? The biological toll, aging, and time manipulation. When considering the idea of pausing time, it's impossible to ignore the intricate ballet happening within our biology. Our bodies are constantly in motion, cells dividing, repairing, aging. If time suddenly slowed or halted, it would be tempting to believe that we'd be suspended in youth, forever young and vibrant. But the moment we poke beneath the surface, the biological toll reveals itself as a mixed bag of unintended consequences. For starters, aging is not merely about external appearance. It's deeply rooted in molecular processes, telomeres shortening, mitochondrial efficiency declining, and the accumulation of cellular damage. Freeze time and what happens to these processes. On a fundamental level, stopping time could mean halting cellular repair mechanisms too. Our bodies rely on continuous processes, like protein synthesis and DNA repair, to maintain health. When these processes are paused, even momentarily, damage that would typically be repaired could calcify into permanent harm. Imagine the nick in a paint job, that tiny scrape that gets soothed over day after day, being suddenly frozen in that imperfect state. Over prolonged periods without progression, tissues might stiffen, and our biological systems could become more vulnerable to breakdowns once time resumes. You might anticipate looking the same forever, but beneath that skin, a quiet chaos might be brewing, waiting for the clock to restart. Another wrinkle involves the complexity of neurobiology. Our brains are especially delicate in this dance of aging. Neuroplasticity and synaptic function diminish with age, and these are crucial for memory and learning. If you stop time, neural processes that depend on molecular signaling could stall, leading to a paradoxical scenario. You may appear ageless, yet your brain's capacity to adapt or process new information might stagnate or even deteriorate. The idea of experiencing eternal youth becomes unsettling when coupled with the risk of cognitive stagnation. Plus, imagine the emotional toll. Eternal youth combined with memories that sit frozen in time, unable to evolve or heal from emotional wounds. The biological landscape of aging isn't just about appearances. It's about a vast, interconnected system that keeps us alive, aware, and adaptable. Furthermore, due to the interconnected nature of biological systems, stopping time could disrupt homeostasis, the fine balance that sustains life. Hormonal signals, blood flow, immune responses, all operate on dynamic schedules. Halt them, and you risk unintentional chaos once the pause ends. An immune system, for example, might ignore the fact that pathogens could be multiplying in your absence, leaving you vulnerable when time resumes. The longer the suspension, the greater the potential for these systems to become out of sync, leading to unpredictable outcomes. Aging might be slowed or halted temporarily, but the biological stressors, oxidative stress, protein misfolding, mitochondrial decay, would continue their silent march, waiting for the moment when normal life restarts. In a way, pausing time might subvert the immediate perception of youth, but trigger unseen biological chaos lurking beneath the surface. Potential for abuse and control. The allure of pausing time carries with it a promise of ultimate control, an idea that if you could freeze everything around you, you'd hold the keys to life itself. But with great power comes an even greater temptation to manipulate, misuse, or abuse that power. Think about it. What begins as a fantastical escape from mundane routines could quickly morph into a tool for personal advantage, or worse, domination. People are inherently driven by desires, power, greed, envy, and when those desires intersect with the ability to halt the world, the potential for exploitation grows exponentially. Control over time could easily mirror the temptation to cheat in a game of life, bending rules in ways that no one could detect. Imagine having a pause button during an important presentation, allowing one to rewrite their mistakes or craft a flawless narrative. However, it could also mean sneaking into a store without paying, or even more sinister acts like sabotaging someone's reputation or career behind the scenes. There's an ironic, dark humor in the thought of someone blithely freezing time to fix their own problems, only to find others' lives unraveling because they occasionally played God without considering the bigger picture. The question then becomes, how do you regulate or prevent such misuse if the power is so tempting? The anxiety of potential abuse isn't limited to individual mischief. When whole groups or governments gain the ability to control time, the stakes escalate dramatically. Consider authoritarian regimes that might use it to manipulate elections, erase dissent, or hide their wrongdoings indefinitely. The thought that a dictator could pause time, suppress opposition, or rewrite history to suit their narrative is chilling. Even in the comparatively benign realm of personal use, the temptation to control outcomes, to freeze a loved one's future, halt aging, or extend one's own lifespan, hints at a fragile boundary between using such a power for good and succumbing to greed or vanity. On a more introspective note, there's a strange human paradox here. The wish to control time often stems from fears, fear of loss, aging, or failure. Yet, wielding such control could diminish genuine interactions. If we can pause to get everything just right, do we risk losing spontaneity and authentic experience? Manipulating time might give a false sense of mastery, but it could also turn life into a series of artificially curated moments. The real danger lies not just in external abuse, but in the erosion of our own human vulnerability, a vulnerability that makes life rich, unpredictable, and sometimes painfully beautiful. Cultural and religious interpretations. Throughout centuries and across civilizations, the idea of pausing time has often intersected with deep-rooted spiritual and cultural beliefs. Various traditions see the manipulation of time, or moments frozen in it, as more than just a sci-fi fantasy. For many, it touches on the sacred, the mystical, and the moral. For example, in some indigenous cultures, the perception of time isn't linear but cyclical, linked with spiritual energies and ancestors. The ability to halt time might be viewed as a divine gift or a sacred privilege bestowed upon shamans or spiritual leaders, allowing them to communicate with spirits or intervene in worlds beyond the physical. Such acts are sometimes considered sacred acts of balance, holding the universe's rhythm in delicate hands. Religious interpretations often bring a nuanced perspective, blending notions of divine omnipotence with human humility. Christianity, for instance, views time as a divine domain, something ultimately under God's control. The idea of stopping or manipulating time might be akin to a divine prerogative, something reserved only for the divine or perhaps the messengers of divine will. In some biblical stories, prophets or divine figures could manipulate natural laws. Pondering what it means to pause time challenges believers to think about divine sovereignty versus human hubris. Many religious traditions also hold that time's flow carries moral implications. Delays and pauses in life are seen as moments for reflection, testing patience, or divine intervention. In Hinduism, the concept of time is deeply intertwined with karma and the concept of the eternal cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction. The idea of stopping time could evoke the power of Shiva as the destroyer and transformer, controlling the cosmic dance that unfolds according to divine will. A pause in the universe might symbolize a divine pause to reflect on the past, reevaluate karma, or contemplate cosmic balance. Some philosophical and mystical schools view the ability to pause time as a symbol for enlightenment, moments of profound inner stillness that mirror the universe's eternal, unchanging core. Here, time isn't just a linear ticking clock, but a fluid, divine rhythm that can be momentarily interrupted for insight. In contrast, some cultures and spiritual paths emphasize the fleeting nature of time as a lesson in humility. The dreamlike quality of moments slipping through our fingers warns against attachment and encourages living in the present. If time could stand still, it might be perceived as an opening for hubris or an invitation to challenge the divine order, which many cultures warn against. The moral tension lurks. Would holding onto a moment distort the natural flow, or could it be a divine act of mercy, granting humans a glimpse of eternity? The cultural whispers around such power remind us that while it may seem tempting to freeze life's fleeting beauty, there is wisdom in surrendering to its inevitable passage, celebrating each second as a gift rather than a battleground for control. The long-term future of a pausable time. If time could be paused indefinitely, the long-term implications stretch far beyond mere convenience. Imagine the possibilities. Entire careers spent perfecting a skill in what feels like moments, or escaping daily monotony with a simple press of a button. But underneath the alluring surface of endless extra moments lies a tangled web of consequences that could reshape human existence itself. On a societal level, the fabric of progress and innovation might unravel or accelerate in unpredictable ways. Scientific discoveries could be made in a blink, yet countless innovations could also stagnate if people lose the motivation to push forward without the looming threat of a ticking clock. Looking inward, the psychological toll of having the power to freeze and unfreeze reality at will is intriguing. Would humans develop a sense of detachment from time, or perhaps a dependence on pausing to avoid uncomfortable emotions? Chronic pause might breed a kind of existential paralysis. The ability to delay everything could make it difficult to commit to decisions, to face the deep messiness of life. Human emotions like anxiety, regret, or impatience might either diminish or intensify, depending on how this power is wielded. Some might use pause as a shield against life's inevitable chaos, while others could become obsessed with controlling every moment, losing themselves in the pursuit of perfect control. In the distant future, a society equipped with such technology might battle with humanity's innate desire to pad the passage of time. A world where moments can be frozen could lead to a drastic redefinition of what it means to live fully. Would people become immortal in moments, living countless lifetimes encoded in a single existence? Or perhaps societal hierarchies would shift. Those with control over time manipulation might wield unimaginable influence over others. The concept of aging might vanish or transform into a mere custom, altering the entire understanding of mortality and legacy. The ethics of indefinite pause would provoke profound debate. Many might question whether a life without the natural flow of time defeats the very purpose of human experience. Envision now the potential for collaboration, conflict, and societal evolution. In some ways, pause could act as a great equalizer. If everyone has access, disparities could diminish as leisure and learning become unlimited. But if only a select few hold that power, inequalities might deepen into unbridgeable divides. Ultimately, the long-term future of a pausable time hinges on whether humanity will master such a gift or become enslaved by its possibilities. Whether it leads to enlightenment or chaos depends as much on human nature as on the technology itself. It becomes a question not just of what we would do with infinite moments, but of who we want to be in the face of such power. Imagining a world where time can be paused forever. Time, that relentless river we all swim in, moves forward with an unwavering rhythm until it doesn't. Picture a world where you could stop time entirely, not just freeze moments for a few seconds, but preserve the pause indefinitely. It's fascinating to think about the implications, the feelings such an ability could stir, and the moral dilemmas it would raise. For starters, imagine the sheer elation of halting time during a stressful moment, your boss's upcoming critique, a critical exam, or a heartbreaking conversation. No more rushing, no more anxiety about deadlines slipping away. In the blink of an eye, everything stands still, leaving you with a crisp, silent universe and endless seconds to think, act, or simply breathe. However, this power isn't just about personal convenience. It opens a Pandora's box of profound questions. Could one, for instance, use this pause to indulge in leisure forever, reading endlessly, savoring a perfect sunset, or binge-watching your favorite show without ever feeling guilty about lost time? Or would eternal stillness eventually breed a certain sense of loneliness? Humans thrive on movement and interaction. Connection requires change. Preventing that change by stopping time would mean living in a kind of static limbo, where moments become memories frozen in time, but no new ones fill the void. It invites a sense of bittersweet irony. In pausing the world, would we also pause ourselves, becoming spectral guardians of moments that have already passed? Thinking practically, the logistical chaos of a forever freeze becomes clear. Who would be in control? Would it be accessible to everyone, or locked behind layers of secret technology or mystical power? If only the privileged could pause the world at will, disparities could deepen. If, on the other hand, it were universally available, how would cities, economies, and social systems endure? Imagine traffic jams, frozen mid-flow, or entire stock markets halted while traders stand motionless, waiting for the clock to tick again. These frozen scenes might look poetic at first. An urban ballet paused mid-dance, but they also underscore a kind of dystopian potential for stagnation, where progress, growth, and even the simple joy of moving forward become luxuries. On an emotional level, the idea of an eternal pause teeters on the edge of melancholia. Would certainty about endless time trap us in moments of longing or regret? Standing still, forever, could intensify feelings of loss for things gone by or held dear. It might bring comfort to hold onto perfect memories, but could also lead to an obsession with the past, ignoring the future's inevitable arrival. The human experience thrives on impermanence. Without change, life could lose its flavor, becoming a dull, unchanging tableau. The paradox is striking. Pause time, and you may find yourself wishing to unfreeze the world just to feel the pulse of life again. So, here we are. Imagine for a moment what life would be like if we could pause time at will. We'd seize those perfect mornings, catch up on dreams long postponed, or even pause the chaos just long enough to breathe. The key takeaway? The power to stop time isn't just about dodging responsibilities or stealing moments. It's about recognizing how fleeting and precious each second really is. Because, ultimately, reality presses on. And no matter how tempting it sounds to freeze the world, maybe the real magic lies in embracing the flow just as it is. If you've ever wondered whether slowing down or pushing pause might make life a little better, you're not alone. We all carry some version of that desire, sometimes just to hear our own thoughts or savor a quiet moment. So, next time you're caught in the rush, remember, the true pause button may be in your mind after all, waiting to be discovered with a deep breath or a calmer perspective. Stay tuned for more mind-bending ideas and reflections that might just change how you see your everyday world. And hey, maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the most powerful pause is the one within you, ready to bring a little more clarity and humor to this wild, unstoppable ride.